Welcome to the Writer's Den. My name is Jane Waters Thomas, and today we're going to be talking with an incredible writer. It's just fun to listen to her tell stories even. You know she has to be a writer. And so when we ran across one another in some places in Polk County over the past few months, I asked her if she would be the next greatest interview, and of course she was, and we want to welcome Cassie Jacoby with us today.
Thank you, Jane. This is such an honor to be here because writing is my bliss, and thanks for noticing.
Well, you know, it's kind of fun because at the Writer's Den, we typically have interviewed authors, and you're a writer, you're a journalist. Tell me a little bit about how you got started in journalism.
This is all I've ever wanted to do in my life, which it seems people have said, really? You majored in journalism? I wanted to be a writer when I was 12 years old and said to my mother, what do you do and what do you major in when you want to be a writer? She said, journalism. So that took me on the path of writing in all manners. So writing for news, for television, for radio. One of the greatest things I got to do in my life is write for a documentary for public television. So I got to write and produce a documentary that went all over the country on, of all things, paleontology. It was called Sunrise at Bone Valley, the story of Frank Garcia, a self-taught paleontologist from Tampa. And it showed all over the country, and it was one of the greatest experiences. So it turns out I can write just about anything. Entomology, philately, that's stamp collecting. I've gotten these assignments, and I don't even know what that is, but I'm gonna Google it and find out, and it's a real great quest. Researching is so much fun, and to learn new things every day.
Well, you know, and I often hear of writers, whether it's an author and a published author or a newspaper journalist, the research is the key. Knowing what you're writing about, and that you really can't even get into the meat of a good story if you haven't done the proper research.
And I love meeting people who have a story to tell. And so the #1 tip I always give people is listen. And the other thing is I record everything. I gotta get out my iPhone and I put it on the utilities and get that voice memo in there, because one great compliment I got years ago, I did a little video brochure for St. Leo College, thank you very much, St. Leo, and got to do an 8-minute video why you should go to school there, and I recorded the interview on what they wanted the documentary, the little mini documentary, to say. And afterwards, when I gave them the script, they said, how did you know this is exactly what we wanted? And I said, well, I listened and I recorded you. So I gave them back what they said, but it is some people call a writer a word mechanic, because you are kind of putting the words together. My little baby's the words, and when they get to where it's almost like poetry. When I get goosebumps when I see something that I really am happy with. Absolutely.
So you've actually done technical writing, journalism, which is, I'm coming back to that over and over in our talk today, but in mechanical writing or in technical writing, that's a much different process.
It really is.
Than writing a story, say, for The Sun or, okay.
You don't so much get into the heart of the storyteller as you do just the facts, ma'am. You know, it is kind of cut and dry and very succinct, not a lot of flowing, eloquent words. So really to the point, and very, when I did some technical writing with the University of Florida, in fact, I kept going up and down the South Florida coast, writing, starting at the University of Florida's horticulture and entomology research, and did some technical stuff on the invasion of Formosan termites. So I know more about termites than I ever thought I'd ever. They're fascinating, really. But with Dr. Nanyao Su, who invented the hexaflumeron in the Centricon system. Okay, that's
how interesting.
And it sticks too. I can't forget. You know, I can't remember names, but I can certainly remember hexaflumeron. But so with these kind of things, I call my PhDs my crazy professors that invented flubber and two-headed lettuce and things like that. But they liked working with me because I did translate the PhD talk into maybe some language that people can understand.
Something more reasonable.
You got to write to a really lower kind of think of everybody in, pardon the 6th graders, because what are we smarter than a 7th grader? I don't know, but they're pretty smart these days. But we have to really write down, maybe, I don't know, 5th grade, 3rd grade.
And I think that
clear speak.
Yes, it's around 5th grade is what I've always been taught in writing. If you're trying to get that message out so that it's clear to all, you know, in writing technically, how do you how do you shut down that creative flow? Because you're one of the most creative writers that I'm fortunate to know. And when I read some of your work, it all flows. You can see your artistic ability in it. So how do you shut down that creative flow and get to nuts and bolts and what your nutty professors, as you call them, how do you get to their important information and shut it all down?
I sneak some in because I just can't shut it down. It turns out everybody has a beautiful story. And some of these professors, I'll never forget, I got to do one on the restoration of the Cassie River. And so the technical information about bringing life back into the water, the DO, the oxygen back into the water where the invertebrates were coming back to life. And this professor, I said, you really seem like you love bugs. And he just said, oh, I always loved bugs. When I was a child, I'd like to collect frogs and tadpoles and see. And his passion came out. So I think there's room for that. But yeah, you're right. Then I usually submit it to whoever's in charge, and they're going to say, well, get more technical. So we have to just get the facts in. And there's usually a limit on how much information you can put out. And so I could just give volumes and volumes and volumes. And when I was editing the documentary on Sunrise at Bone Valley on paleontology, I got to go on a 5-story drag line in Mulberry out in the phosphate pits, and it was so interesting. The drag line driver was so passionate about it, self-taught, of course, and he could tell you that's the Pleistocene era, and that's this, and that's, he knew what everything was out there. So I had about 15 minutes of the drag line driver, and so they did have me cut some of that out.
So at this point, you should have a PhD in how many different things?
Jack of all trades, master of none, I've heard journalists called.
Right.
But it's just so fun to learn something new every day and to follow your bliss and to be passionate about something. I'm working on a story right now that I am so excited about, and it's part of the, someone will have a festival, like you had this great bluegrass and gospel festival. Well, it sparks into other things, like one of your performers, cloggers. I am so in love with clogging now, I want to be a clogger.
Right.
And so I'm doing a story on autism, rocking on the chain for autism. Right. And I got to meet an autistic young man who just graduated from Vanguard, who knew Vanguard specializes in Asperger's syndrome.
Yes.
And some of the greatest minds and creative genius in the world have Asperger's syndrome, or had it. And so to follow that thread, and it turns out one of the reporters in The Sun is very talented writer, creative genius, James Coulter, and he has Asperger's syndrome. So it's so interesting. I got to interview him. I got to interview all these stories. So now I'm sitting on about a 10-page article that's got to be squished down into 2 pages.
And there's some, that's a very good point. Editing is a really big deal, and it goes through several layers of editing, if I'm not mistaken.
And then someone else looks at it and takes some of my babies out, my words. But you're right. How to get back to the technical writing is, I let it go. That's one of my greatest tips someone gave me, and one of the books I love. It's called Wild Mind. And you just write everything down. I interview people, I put the headphones on, I listen to the interview, and I go back to that moment, and then I write everything down, and I throw in things, and I research, and I write everything, and then I start cutting.
Yeah.
Edit, edit, edit. And then I edit it again, and then edit it again.
And then it gets to the editor, and they edit your baby, as you said.
That's right. And so then it sometimes with a technical thing, it gets right down to just, there's pretty much not a lot of those, the fancy. And sometimes the fancy words might get a little too fancy, so sometimes the most beautiful thing is a very succinct sentence that has a lot of heart.
Yeah. So what path did you start on to become a journalist? Obviously you went to school, as you mentioned earlier, but tell me a little bit about the path that you've been on to be where you are today, because everybody loves Cassie Jacoby. Everybody in the county wants Cassie to write their story for them.
So glad to hear that.
So, yeah. so what got you to this place?
Well, I used to read voraciously, so I highly recommend read everything you can get your hands on. And I was sort of stuck when I was when I was 12, I was kind of stuck on the teenage romance kind of things. And my Barbie and Ken were riding their horses and always having some great stories with all their little friends. So I'd create these fictional things, and I'd write them all down, and I'd give them to all my friends. My friends were waiting for me to give them another installment. Where's the next book? And so then I went to the Winter Haven High School and worked on the Trident newspaper, and I was one of the editors there. So I did newspaper writing from, I can't believe, 100 million years ago. I'm back to things are in a circle in life. So I'm back to writing for the Polk County Sun. It's such a fabulous, it's good news too. It's a fabulous newspaper.
Yeah, and I really wanted you to mention the good news portion of news. Journalists so often are kind of wrapped up in our thoughts as readers, as these people that go out and just seek the worst, and that's just not the case. It's not, and you get the glory of writing all the fabulous fun stuff.
And the interesting challenge is to take something that may be a problem or a negative story and turn it into something really positive. Because at the bottom line of the story that we wrote about your event is there are people who are homeless who need help. They can't afford to fix and repair. They have challenges in life, how to pay their electric bill, how to survive. And so you have a great fundraiser that ultimately helps them survive. So at the bottom of these challenging stories where there's some bad news, but the good news comes out, we bring it to the surface, and that there are people with great hearts like Jane who are helping us all survive and making the world better.
Well, and I do believe that journalists do make the world better. In a lot of outreach work in the community, nonprofits, countywide, worldwide, rely on our journalists and our news friends to be able to share our story, to be able to share their stories. And I look at some of the stories that have come out recently that are good news stories that make your heart just fly, good stuff in the midst of media where we're dealing with world crisis or major crisis right here in our United States with rioting and things of that nature. And it's just wonderful to be able to read some of the stuff that just brings happiness to you.
And inspirational too. It's just such a beautiful story to hear what one person can do, the difference one person can make. And the good news about being a writer too, even though it's a challenging time for newspapers, some young people might not even pick up a newspaper anymore, but it's fun to touch it. Go ahead, don't be afraid. You can open it up and you can read it. You can carry it around with you. You might not have a chance where you can get online and read your iPhone and your readers, but the newspaper, I think when it's come to good news, local news, with great pictures of the kids doing fun things, I think it's here to stay. The good news about being a writer though, somebody's got to write that content that's going online on websites and on social media. Although it's getting really short on Twitter. That's a challenge too, to write briefly. But you can take it everywhere you go. It's given me a lot of confidence because no matter what job I have, no one can really take that away from me. I work for myself. I'm working to please my bosses, but I ultimately have the toughest critic is myself. So I want to please, and I want to please people like you. It makes me so happy. Don't forget to pick up the phone and call like Jane did and say, that was a great story, thank you.
Yeah, and that matters. It does matter.
Makes so much.
We need to be thankful, and I'm speaking of all the leaders that are in our county, and truly every county. We need to be thankful for good press. It's really easy to see, again, all the negative stuff, but when you see a good article, I encourage folks around me all the time, man, if a writer does something that's fabulous, talk to them, because how often do you actually get a return call on something that you've written?
That's a beautiful thing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And it does matter. I know we should, the older we get, we should be tough and we should not be able to, but it always helps to hear that someone did appreciate that you got it. You got to the bottom of the story. And we make mistakes, so you can go ahead and call them up and say, that wasn't right, and we'll do a retraction. But it's a challenge to, there's so many good stories in this community, so many ones with great heart to keep coming up. And if you ever get stuck and you can't get something done, someone told me something wise one time. They said, if you can't write something, maybe you don't have enough information. Go back to your source, do a little more research, go back and listen to that interview again. And I love it when I'm interviewing something and I hear the sound bite. There's my TV writing coming back in, or radio. You hear a sound bite and you go, that's the ticket, that's the money line. That's what it's all about, the heart and soul of it.
Absolutely, and I love that you're bringing to the surface in this talk today that you know, journalists have hearts, and I don't know of a journalist that I personally know, and I know several, that don't have an extreme passion for the work that they do and reporting quality and reporting truth.
The bottom line, yeah, get to the bottom, and it's a real fight because there's an actual, when you do these personality tests, I took one of those, I think it was the DISC, and they came to the bottom. I was like, you fight for the truth. I say, so you're in the total right profession, because a journalist, I will like die to get to the truth and and fight the good battle, right the wrongs, and just sometimes that's hard when you're dealing with maybe an organization that's not aligned in the same mindset. Mm-hmm. So you have to find your right group. And so many journalists are like the starving, it used to be the starving artists. I think it's the starving journalists now.
Starving arts.
The starving arts, but the starving writers, and they are just, you just can't stop doing it. You have to do it.
Right, and you know, and bringing the arts into thought here, you know, the one thing I heard you mention is that, you know, you've written for television, you've written for radio, you've written for newspapers, magazines, you've done technical writing. You have really touched several different arts in your writing, and that has to be very exciting. And I believe that you've also written for several arts organizations.
Absolutely, thank you very much, Lake Wales Arts Council and the Polk State Lake Wales Arts Center, and Bev and Mary at Polk Art Alliance,
yes.
Polk Arts Alliance. Thank you for letting me contribute to Artifacts. What a great magazine.
Yes.
So slick.
Miss
so nice.
Beverly does a beautiful job with that magazine, and I do get to read some of your stuff in Artifacts, which is an amazing resource for all of us in our county. You know, if you had an inspiration, if there was one person that just hangs on the end of your thoughts about who inspired you to become a journalist, who would that person be?
Well,
or persons maybe.
I have been a great, I watch anything I can get on, well, Edward R. Murrow, a great muckraker who he's very much, he passed away years ago, and Fred Friendly was one of his producers. There's a lot of, you can Google that and you can look up some information on that, but great journalism who believed in truth and integrity and honor, great honor. He was in World War II in London and fighting, helping to get news out and information. One of the people that I admire so much, I'm just so fascinated with all different aspects of the world and science, and Jane Goodall.
Oh, yes.
Who was a self-taught chimpanzee authority, and I got to meet her when she came to Lowry Park Zoo years ago. I was working for WEDU, the greatest public television station in the world, and I got to write a little promo for her, a little 30-second promo about, you know, why you should watch nature programs on public TV. So I asked her if she would do that. And I had my book, her book, My Friend the Chimpanzees. I carried it around for 20 years, and she autographed it, which was I still treasure. And this is years ago. But she said, I said, would you consider doing this promotion for us, this little spot? And she said, well, let me read it first.
Yeah.
Gosh, what if she doesn't like it?
What if Jane Goodall does not like your work?
Rejected by Jane Goodall. So I have her autograph, and these are my little treasures. So yeah, passionate about things like that. People that have inspired me.
And you have been in front of a lot of people in your career, just a lot of people. Is there a story that sticks out in your mind that you go, man, that was the story that maybe turned the tide, left turn, something about it was fabulous, something that just kind of clicked with you?
Gosh, they're all like, I've talked about them being my babies.
Right.
I think it's the most recent one. I think it was yours.
Oh.
No, I said again too, I want to write a story about your whole life. You're doing so many things and you're helping so many people. And I must say, Jane, when I came here in 2006, my mother was aging, and she passed away at 94. But for the last 10 years I've been here. And when I first arrived, actually that's 9 years, isn't it?
That's okay.
2015 from 2006. Okay, so when I got here in 2006, guess who helped me get a job, reestablish everything? It was Jane. We were on Keep Winter Haven Clean and Beautiful, and you just took me under your wing, and you just made sure you got me job interviews, and you got me all kinds of stuff. And it was just
I know
a
great
joy.
people when I meet them.
It was just a joy, 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 joy. You have been a real inspiration in my life, and I really want to do a story on you. And I got to say one more person who's really inspired me, and I want to work on his life story, and that's Gene Leedy.
Oh, yes.
I must, editorially speaking, I love that man. So
yeah,
I have a special
absolutely.
place in my heart for him. But he's got a great story. What a storyteller. He has a story on, he's a Winter Haven mid-century modern architect who's now 87, and we got to get his life story in a book, because he's got lots of things to tell. Some of them we can't tell because they're some real private information about, he knows the history on everybody in Winter Haven.
So do you feel that you're going to be writing a book in the future?
I would love to. It's really his book, so I'm just the conduit to have him. He actually wants to get a computer. He hated computers in the past because they did away with drafting. They changed architecture because now everything's with computers. So now he's starting to like computers, and ironically his son Ingram Leedy is a computer genius who is into internet security and all kinds of wonderful things with...
he's his own story.
He
could be his own book for sure. So
his whole family, his daughter Safi Leedy, his daughter Helen Leedy, Helen over in Tampa, who's a PR wizard. But anyway, Helen Knight. So there's some great stories to tell.
That's a great book. That would be a really, I think locally, that would be just a well-read book.
His friendship with Frank Lloyd Wright, Buckminster Fuller, all these great stories. And so he was the father of the Sarasota School of Architecture. So now I'm really I've got all his stories pretty much down in my head. We just have to put it on the paper. So yeah, maybe there's a book coming.
Maybe there's a book coming. So we'll cross over from technical to journalism to author.
My little 12-year-old stories that I grew up with people that I'm still seeing. We're having a girls' night out on Thursday night, and I still see people I was in the 3rd grade with saying, when's the next installment coming? My little books. And it's just don't let anybody, don't let the dream stealers take away your dreams. Follow your passion and do it. If you've got a book in you, if you've got a dream, it might take you till your old age.
We're not that.
I feel 12 inside,
We're
though.
Not that. We're not that.
I still feel 12 because I think that when you have a passion and you follow it, it keeps you young forever. You're never working.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're doing what you love.
And I will say that in the arts, across the arts, that is the one thing that is truth for all artists, whether they're musicians, performers, actors, actresses, writers, painters. It's that you are living your passion, and I find that, and maybe this is better stated as a question even. What would it be like if you couldn't write and you're a writer?
Wow. Well, my head would probably explode. I'm still running around looking for a piece of paper to write things down on because I can't use my iPhone fast enough to type things in there. But I'm just obsessed with, I need to get it out of my head. I feel much better when I can type it down. But yeah, I would probably, that would be tough.
Well, you mentioned them as your babies.
I probably talk too much.
Those words are your babies, and so absolutely, I can't imagine not being able to get it out. It's kind of fun to get that reaction from a writer because I know that writing is my passion, and if I couldn't write, I walk around with 2 different journals at all times, and it has to be written down. It has to get out.
And the great handwriting, that was a great question, by the way, but writing it down, that tactile sense of using, I like our very sharp pencil with an eraser, and so lots of erasers. But don't be afraid to write down anything, even if you feel stuck. Just let it rip. Let it rip.
And you're absolutely right. And in that, one of the things that I teach in creative writing classes with students is, I am thrilled that they know how to operate computers and keyboards, but I want to see handwritten work, and that's a challenge because handwriting doesn't look like it used to. Penmanship's not what it once was. So, but that tactile, that sensory of mind to hand to paper flow, there's something just healing about that.
It really is a beautiful experience, and just to see at the end of the day when I read what's written, we talked about what was frustrating. So sometimes though when somebody does go in and edit something I've written and they change something that doesn't really, take my name off it, please.
Right. I didn't do that. I didn't do that.
That's not what I meant to say. But it is every Friday. I just can't wait to actually. I've written the deadline day is Wednesday for our newspaper, and then it comes out Friday morning, and it's available free all over the county. So just look for a box that says the Polk County Sun, and I can't wait to actually pick up the paper and then look at it because I get to take pictures too, which is really a fun bliss.
You get to do the whole thing, and I think more and more I'm hearing that journalists are also having to do their own photography now. now. As hard copy newspaper and that industry takes a turn, they're combining some of those jobs now. Is that correct?
It is. We have to be butterflies and do our metamorphosis. And, you know, the great photographers, though, you just cannot. You've got the eye or you don't have the eye. So fortunately, I think I have the eye. I've been told I have the eye to actually see the composition, but I also have a great camera that I put it on auto and it usually doesn't fail.
Thank God for technology.
I know. I wanted to learn all those f-stops and all that other stuff, and now with digital cameras and everything, we can just go in there and Photoshop.
Yeah, I was going to say, Photoshop seems to be the key for the whole thing. It is for me anyway.
Edit, you know, the writing and just constantly edit.
I'm just always thrilled when the subject's in clear focus for me.
Yes.
So, well, Cassie, it has been wonderful to interview you. You are such a fun lady, and your writing definitely follows suit of that.
Thank you, and I cannot wait to tell the Jane story. Look for it soon. Coming soon to a newspaper near you.
For more information on Cassie Jacoby and all the amazing things that she writes about in Polk County, you can contact her directly at the Sun in Lake Wales, or just stop by a newsstand and pick up one of her great newspapers. Thank you so much for joining us at the Writer's Den, and we'll see you next time.